Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special Friday, This Week in Science podcast broadcast. I am so thrilled to be able to speak with you today and to hang out with you on I'm going to say Science Friday. I do love that show. Ira has been doing some great work, and now the new host coming in there. Science Friday is one of the most amazing science outlets out there, and I've taken inspiration many times. But today is a day for us to be inspired by science and the people that are working on the front lines and working on the front lines of talking about what we're learning in science, the science communicators from the science itself. All right, so we are going to start this show with a little bit of music, and then we're gonna go, right? You ready for a show? Woohoo! Okay, as we do, everyone hit the likes, hit the subscribes, share the show so we show up in the algorithms and everybody wants to talk to us. And I'm going to go down. Look, there's the top of my head. I'm not too short anymore. Okay. And this is the part where I say this was edited out and the podcast is going to begin now. Three, two, this is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 1030, recorded on Friday, September 19th, 2025. Science Under Siege. Hey everyone, I am Dr. Kiki, and today on the show, we're going to fill your head with the siege on science. But first,
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I wanna learn everything. I wanna fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I wanna know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
hello and happy Friday, science fans, everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. Happy Day of Science. I'm alone on the show. Well, not for reals, because I have some incredible guests and I am so excited to introduce them to you. We have a special interview show today, speaking with Michael E. Mann and Peter J. Hotez, who have written a book, Science Under Siege, that is now available. I've got Post-it notes, bookmarking, special sections, and things for us to talk about. So as we get going, this is a short episode. We're just focusing on the conversation, and I really look forward to hearing what you have to say about this after the fact. In the meantime, remember, you can subscribe to This Week in Science. All places podcasts are found. Look for This Week in Science. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch as a live streaming video program. You can catch us most nights, Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Pacific time-ish. And if you want show notes and other information and links to our Patreon, Zazzle store, past episodes, and YouTube and Facebook and all those places, go to TWIS.org, our website. Please share TWIS today. Okay, introducing our wonderful guests today. Michael Mann, Presidential Distinguished Scholar in the Department of Earth and Environmental Science at the University of Pennsylvania, Director of the Penn Center for Science, Sustainability, and the Media. He contributed to the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize and was elected to the U.S. Academy of Sciences in 2020 and lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know lots of people who would go, Philly, right? Peter Hotez is the Dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine and Professor of Pediatrics and Molecular Virology and Microbiology at Baylor College of Medicine, where he's also the co-director of the Texas Children's Center for Vaccine Development. He's an elected member of the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, and in 2022 was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on the COVID-19 vaccine. He lives in Houston, Texas. So these incredible scientists across the country from each other have come together to write a book. I'd love to bring them to the stage. Welcome to the show, Doctors Mann and Hotez. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to, in this moment, move our little TWIS boundary off of our stage so that we can see you both more fully. Okay, both of you, I have watched your work for years. We've met, we've spoken in the past, but since then, like as I said before the show, it just seems like it's been a lifetime. we've had many lifetimes since, just a couple of years ago. How are you both doing? Peter, how is it down in Texas right now?
Well, it's as Dickens would say, the best and worst of times. The science is going well. I mean, we're making discoveries. Our COVID vaccine reached 100 million people, proving we can bypass the big pharma companies. And that's relevant because when the anti-vaccine guys attack me, they always say I'm a shill for the pharma companies, when it's the opposite. We provided a model so you could bypass the big pharma companies. And now, my first love was hookworm disease. That's what I worked on for my MD PhD thesis in New York City at Rockefeller University and Cornell. And now it's working really well in clinical trials. So that's exciting. And we're doing a number of climate health initiatives because of, as Michael will tell us, the rising temperatures, altered rainfall patterns are bringing back diseases like dengue and chikungunya and Zika virus infection and hookworm infection to where I am in Texas and the Gulf Coast. So we're doing a number of climate health early warning systems. So the science is going great, but the level of aggression and attacks, because of the way I've been speaking out and about why vaccines don't cause autism. That's how I got involved, because I have a daughter with autism, and having years of discussions with Mr. Kennedy have put us in a dark place there. So best of times, worst of times.
Michael?
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you, Kiki, and we're big fans of what you do. It's so important to communicate the science and its implications to the public, and you do such a wonderful job doing that with this show. And as Peter said, you have now. My first love was not hookworm, I have to say. So that's what separates us. It wasn't my first
From
crush.
hookworms to the atmosphere. No.
But it's jarring right now, because on the one hand, the science that we're doing, we're pushing the frontiers of science ever forward, making amazing discoveries in the health sciences and the physical sciences, climate modeling, the way we're now making use of AI and machine learning to further the science that we do. And that's certainly true in climate modeling. So on the one hand, the scientific tools that we have available to us and the science that we're doing right now is pushing the boundaries even further forward. At the same time, though, when it comes to sort of public policy, when it comes to the way that society is interpreting or making use of science, we are going backwards, right? In the United States right now, a country that Peter and I talk about this in the book. This is a country that was built on science. The economic growth that we've seen over the past century was a consequence of the investments that we made in basic scientific infrastructure that led to the growth in science and technology that has propelled us ever forward. But at the same time, now we have a federal government where the director of Health and Human Services, R.F. Kennedy Jr., is an anti-vaxxer, is trying to block access to vaccines, trying to defund the work that Peter and his colleagues are doing to develop new vaccines for, as Peter said, the ever worsening pandemics that we're likely to see because of the interaction between the climate crisis and other factors that are leading to more frequent and intense pandemics, deadly pandemics. So, and then in climate, right? I mean, we're seeing a dismantling of the environmental progress made over a half a century by Republican as well as Democratic administrations. All of that disintegrating before our eyes because of an anti-science administration that sees itself as basically a promoter of a number of powerful special interests, the fossil fuel industry and other special interests, rather than a protector of the people. And it's jarring. it's disconcerting, and it's deadly. And that's the bottom line. The point that Peter and I make in this book is that these ever worsening pandemics are deadly. The climate crisis is deadly. And now misinformation and disinformation, which makes it impossible for us to act, makes this even more deadly.
Yeah, I mean that's the sort of the top line of the book, that there's not two existential threats to humanity. There are three. The two that we talk about, of course, are pandemic threats and the climate crisis. But now the third one that now unfortunately may have equal weight is this massive ecosystem of anti-science disinformation that blocks our ability to respond to it. So it's a three-legged tripod.
It is a three-legged tripod, but it seems as though
Or a three-headed monster. We've used different analogies for this. We can't quite decide on the right one, but yes.
Or it's the misinformation, disinformation monster with that's eating or that is, destroying the ability to defend or to
exactly eating
to
its
make
tail
change.
or something like that. It's bad.
And unfortunately, it's attacking not only the science, but it's attacking the scientists and portraying us as public enemies or cartoon villains. And so it's created this sort of very dark situation. And this is why I was so excited when you invited us, because I worry about the young people, right? The young scientists who, here at Baylor, they look at me like Moses in the desert. Why did you bring us here? And I say, well,
you can see the golden calf in the back.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And the point is there is a path of light forward, and Michael was really good about teaching me about this concept of doomism. That we, just to throw up our hands and say there's nothing we can do is not true. There are always things we can do, and we work hard in the book to do that. And it's not about moving to France. There are things that we can do in the United States. And as a young scientist, you still have a very bright future, but you're going to have to be very strategic and deliberate.
Let me just say it's two-sided. Yeah. I've learned so much from working with Peter. This has been one of the most enjoyable ventures of my life. Is the friendship that we've developed in this joint effort to, at a moment that we both see is absolutely critical to the future of our civilization.
Absolutely.
So in all of this, there is this seed of internal strife within academia for years, that when you become the scientist who is engaging with the public, a la Carl Sagan or any of the public scientist figures over the many years, suddenly you're not as credible or good of a scientist anymore, that you've given up some academic rigor by doing that. How, not the attacks from outside, but what has the response to you been, from each of your distinctive fields? And so, Peter, if you could answer that first.
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. I'm glad you asked it. And as Martin Luther King once said, not that I'm comparing ourselves to Martin Luther King, but he talks about it's not just the words of the enemies, but the silence of the friends. And I think that is especially in the biomedical sciences, because the academic health centers are fiercely protective of their institutional brand. And Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital are better than most, but they don't often like their docs and scientists speaking out. Or you kind of get this thing where, well, you're an academic, you're free to speak out, ... but don't screw this up and get the institution in trouble. And of course, if you're out there in the public domain enough, as we all know, you will screw it up and you will get the institution in trouble, and you need to know you have the backing of the institution. So it creates this kind of sword of Damocles that has a very chilling effect. And the reason that's so terrible is that young scientists especially become intimidated in speaking out, or don't feel comfortable doing it, and that creates a vacuum. So that lets the bad actors weaponize what we do, and it portrays us as public enemies or cartoon villains. And then I'll say one more thing and then stop, which is, I don't have a lot of evidence to support that, but I like, there's in our area, there's a great policy group called Research America. They're based in the DC area, and they track these sort of trends, and they ask the American people every couple of years, can you name a living scientist? And can you name an institution where biomedical research is conducted? And the answer is always the same. 75% of Americans cannot name a living scientist, and most Americans can't name an institution where biomedical research is conducted. And that's by design. And when they do finally mention someone, they'll first name Einstein or Jonas Salk, not realizing they've moved on. And then and then Michael, who did they mention?
Quite a long time ago.
Or our good friend Bill Nye, who's a wonderful
engineer,
but he's not a down in the trenches, scientist like Peter or myself, and so there is this.
Yeah, they're not struggling over major revisions of papers from reviewer 2 and grants that don't get discussed in all the scientific meetings. So we're invisible, and that allows them to portray us as shadowy figures in white coats plotting all sorts of nefarious things.
Because you're actually doing your work. Like you're trying to get money to support it and then doing it.
That's right.
Which usually is in a laboratory and not in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
So
well, Kiki, I'm glad you mentioned that because as Peter said, there's this effort, there's this vacuum, right? When we're not out there speaking to the public, then that leaves a vacuum for the bad actors to fill with sort of caricatures, to vilify us and present caricatures of us and to sort of communicate these various myths and talking points, like these scientists, they're just in it for the grant money, as if that the grant money goes to our pockets. No, it funds our research programs, it funds our graduate students, it pays for publications, but the public doesn't know these things. And if we're not out there, not just explaining the science, but explaining how science actually works, it leaves this dangerous vacuum. And that's where Peter and I are doing what we can to sort of fill that vacuum, but we need other voices, and we need to be out there making sure that there's space for younger scientists to come into this world of communication, to feel like they can do so safely, that they have the support of the scientific community. It's so critical.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, let me give you an example. So, one of the talking heads on Fox News, who now has a leadership position in this current administration, would go after me on Fox News, and he say, of course, Hotez is in the secret cabal with Fauci because he has some funding from the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases of the NIH. And it was so disingenuous because the whole microbiology department at his university depends on that NIAID funding. But the point is, science literacy is, but it gave me a good idea, both Michael and I, a good idea that science literacy is not just about informing people about the second law of thermodynamics, but it's also the
first and third law of thermodynamics.
But what is a scientific grant? How does it work? What do scientists do? And what does it mean to be a scientist at presented scientific meetings? Why we don't advance science by debating crackpots? That all has to be advanced as part of this science literacy, I think.
Yeah, and I'm just reflecting on, like, in the book, you talk about being, basically invited to debate RFK Jr. On vaccine issues, on autism issues in a public sphere, and how you did not take the bait, even though everybody who had a side to kind of pull you into, to try and use all of the social pressures they could to bring you into it. I thank you for standing strong, because that's the kind of
thank you to Michael for being my rock there. That's really how we got connected, because
right back at you. And
because
I was just going to say, it's one of my favorite sections of the book, the title "Debate Me, Bro," and Peter can take it from there.
Yeah.
Debate me, bro. Right?
Debate me, bro.
It takes you to a scary place when Joe Rogan and Elon Musk and Kennedy are all ganging up on you, and it's every follower on Twitter except the ones following Taylor Swift are just all on you at once, and you're like, what the heck is going on here? So, but this is why Michael was such an amazing resource, because the attacks on climate science preceded the attacks on biomedicine. I don't know, a decade, 2 decades, and he was really able to help me put it in perspective and say, well, been there, done that. This is how this works.
It was PTSD, right? For me,
Oh
right?
gosh.
Decades after, we in the world of climate science, when we published the hockey stick curve in the late 1990s, and it came under attack because it was this sort of iconic graph. So I had been through this 2.5 decades ago, and then we get into sort of the COVID era, and it's PTSD for me because I see, scientists, wonderful people like Peter, like Tony Fauci, being attacked using exactly the same tactics. In many cases, some of the same organizations and individuals behind those attacks. And I felt like it was important to reach out, and we established this friendship. And it's been wonderful to have this experience to sort of do this sort of Vulcan mind meld, to put our respective experiences together and to see what we can synthesize from them. And that's what the book is really about.
Yeah, and in the book you also refer to Merchants of Doubt by Naomi Oreskes, and she was one of the writers who really brought to public awareness the tactics that are being used, and how we had big tobacco, big sugar, big oil, all, and these big money interest groups that are really working to subdue or to to control public opinion. And now we see, like you said, this coming together, this weaving together now of all these various lines of propaganda, which of course the propaganda playbook came from the CIA back in
but it was like it was honed by the tobacco industry, and then the gun lobby. We see the same, and now in the fossil fuel industry ran with it. And the sort of the health freedom, anti-vax community ran with it as well. And that's what was so instructive for Peter and me, to compare notes and to understand it's the same tactics, it's the same people. It's remarkable.
And then converging with it was a new money-making force post the Merchants of Doubt book, and that is a very lucrative health and wellness influencer enterprise. And have you ever wondered why there are always anti-parasitic drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, fenbendazole? It's because you can buy them up in bulk and they're cheap, and then you can repackage them, jack up the price, and you sell it with a telehealth visit. And the health and wellness influencer empire is like $500 billion empire. But for the model to work, you've got to denigrate things that actually work, like vaccines, and again portray the scientists like myself and others as enemies. And you see some of the most aggressive attacks are coming from that health and wellness influence. And now Mr. Kennedy has adopted that in his language, because in the past, when I've spoken to him, he didn't talk about supplements and this, but now he says, well, you can either get the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine during our measles epidemic in Texas that hit 4 states, or you can get, what turns out to be a useless cocktail of supplements like vitamin A, budesonide, and clarithromycin. You're wondering, where did that come from? Well, that came from the health wellness influencer empire.
Yeah, I mean, we should have learned long ago that if you have a doctor telling you things, or somebody who's an expert telling you certain things and then wanting to sell you a solution, they're very likely not really telling you all the right things. It's called snake oil. But like you said, it's a multi-trillion-dollar economic driver, and it's even bigger than the pharmaceutical industries now. So the Make America Healthy Again empire is bigger money, and there's more in it than there is
the only thing bigger,
supposed big pharma.
the only bigger industry than that is the fossil fuel industry. And so there you have it. There you have it. They're two, the economic models are a little different here, but fundamentally it's about bad actors making huge profits at the expense of people and the planet.
Yeah, and in this book, you lay out, you have your 5 Ps, which you have been telling people about and writing about, and you describe in full in the book. And so some of these bad actors, if one of you would like to talk about how they all tie together, like, because they are separate, but I feel like it's the now is the weaving of them, right? It's all
Let's
at
start
once.
with William Shatner. We're talking about bad actors, right? No, sorry,
No.
we're actually talking about a different kind of bad actor here, just so people understand. Bad
I
faith
love
actors.
Shatner, so hold
For the
on
record,
here.
I love
You know, we all do.
I love you,
We
Bill
all
Shatner.
do, especially his early Twilight Zone episodes. Those are just wonderful. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we name and shame, right? Because we felt it was important to do that. So we've got plutocrats, we've got petrostates, and the United States right now is a petrostate. Our politics are driven by the fossil fuel industry to a large extent. We've got
Petrodollar. Yeah.
Absolutely. We've got propagandists and pros, the ones we've talked about, who are making money from peddling misinformation and disinformation one way or another. And then we've got the press. And we're not just talking about the Murdoch, media empire, the right-wing media, which has done so much damage in both of these domains, but even the legacy media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, that engage in what Peter and I describe as a performative neutrality, pretending, for example, and platforming on the pages, on their editorial pages, on their op-ed pages, the lab leak hypothesis, as if this is, every bit as credible as what the science actually suggests, zoonotic origins. And Peter, I know that's where Peter, Peter's experiences were sort of very instructive here in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger picture, that also along with the financial motivation is the political motivation. And you can understand why a petrostate would want to go after climate science and climate scientists. It's horrible, but it makes sense. It's less obvious why they would attack vaccines and pandemic preparedness until you realize, this sometimes a petrostate will, or a authoritarian government, and too often they're one and the same, will target the intelligentsia and science and scientists for political gain. And we look at that historical 20th century record, and when Stalin threw the Mendelian geneticist Nikolai Vavilov, one of the top geneticists in the world, into the Gulag, where he ultimately perished from exposure and starvation to Gulag Hospital, in order to promote the pseudoscience Lamarckian theories of a non-scientist, Trofim Lysenko, who claimed he could soak the wheat in snow and toughen it up and get it ready for the winter, even though that didn't work, and it caused massive famine and killed millions of people in Ukraine and the Soviet Union during the 30s and 40s. It didn't matter, because that was a means for political control. And that's one of the things we really worry about right now that's happening, as Michael started out this talking about, we are a nation built on the greatness of our research universities and institutions that, gave us the Manhattan Project and victory in the Cold War and victory against AIDS and cancer and all those other good things. But to have it flipped on its side for political control, that takes us to a very dark place. And the closest that we could come to it was to say, this is what Stalin did during the 30s. It's what they did in Weimar Germany to some extent as well.
This whole what's happening now, it's what has happened before will happen again. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. If you never get taught history, well, there you go.
If history doesn't repeat, it certainly does rhyme. And we're seeing the rhyming of history right now here in the United States.
Yeah. And I years back, we came up with the national science standards, and I was very excited about the inquiry-based education standards that were being implemented. And there were several states that decided not to implement the standards, and there are reasons why. And they seem to be certain states that are still doing things a particular way. And yet now it may not matter, because education itself is being dismantled, undermined. How will we be able to address these ideas of understanding science, where we need people to understand how science works, why we're doing it? How are we going to address that if the educational conduit, that funnel, if that channel is undermined, if there's, it's just, if people get curious or they end up on an internet rabbit hole watching YouTube videos like this one. No.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
there.
Yeah, in the book, we sort of talk about the sort of micro strategies for dealing with that and the macro strategies. And the final chapter is really sort of the big picture. What do we need to do? There are lots of things, and we've talked about some of them. Scientists need to be out there. The invisible scientist is part of the problem. We need to create a culture where scientists feel free, feel empowered to be out speaking to the public, helping inform the public. We need support. We need the scientific societies. We need the scientific institutions to back the scientists when they're attacked, when they're vilified by bad actors in the way that they are, because that becomes a disincentive, especially to young scientists, in participating in the public conversation. But then we sort of step back in the end. For all the things to happen that we need to happen, we need policymakers, we need politicians who care about those things, who care about us, who care about science and science-based policy. And the only way that's going to happen is if we turn out in elections and we vote for those politicians. Otherwise, unfortunately, we get the situation that we have right now in the United States, where we have a federal government, and that's an executive branch, a Congress, and a Supreme Court that is working together to undermine everything that we have tried to do for decades, whether it's dealing with the climate crisis, dealing with pandemics, or any of the other major challenges that we face.
Any thoughts on this, Peter?
Yeah, I think what Michael says is absolutely right. And I'm sure some of your viewers, are saying, well, wait a minute, I didn't become a scientist to become a media star and to be out in the public domain. I want to do science, right? I want to do my experiments and write my papers and talk to my colleagues. And you know what? That's totally fine. I think, no one should feel compelled or that they feel like they have to do it. But I think what we're saying is there's a subset, maybe not a big one, but a significant one nonetheless, especially among young people whose commitment to public services at an all-time high, and we have to provide outlets for them to do that, and maybe offering training opportunities to do that, also getting incentivized for promotion and a career advancement. I get evaluated like everybody else does, and I don't see patients anymore, but what do they ask me about? They ask me about my grants and my papers, preferably in what they call high impact journals, whatever that is these days, or they ask me about my grants or my papers in high impact journals, or my grants in high impact journals. Basically, that's it, right?
What about your grants in the high impact journals? Do they ask you about that?
Right. There's nothing there, about the time I spent doing things like this, or and what am I doing in the public communication realm, and so the message gets sent is that stuff's not important. Hey, you want to do it and you want to waste your time doing that kind of stuff, fine. We've got to change that culture in scientific training and career advancement to say, wait a minute, this is almost as important or as important as your next paper, and because the future is at stake, according.
That's right.
The future is at stake and the future is uncertain. I would love to know, currently, a couple of very recent things that had happened in the news. Just this week, we had, and Peter, I'm going to direct this question at you specifically, the Vaccine Review Board for the CDC, the ACIP, which has been stacked with vaccine skeptics, deniers, with people from that great economic force of the health industry and wellness industry. They've voted to change the MMR schedule for vaccination this last week, but they've pushed off the hepatitis decision for newborns. Do you have any thoughts about the process that's happening?
Yeah, I mean it's a continuum. So this started when Mr. Kennedy assumed office as Health and Human Services Secretary. He started out with saying terrible things about people on the autism spectrum, that's how I got involved, because I have a daughter with autism. And then it was about several years ago, I got this call from my assistant, and said, "Hey, I got these two gentlemen on the phone. One is named Dr. Anthony Fauci, and the other one's named Dr. Francis Collins.
Oh
Can you
my
speak with them?" And I
gosh.
said, "Yeah, I think so."
I'll make time.
And they, asked me to speak to Bobby Kennedy, which I did for a year, and saw how deeply dug in he was. But that led me to write the book, Vaccines Did Not Cause Rachel's Autism. And it's been off to the races ever since. And so he started right out with a bang, revisiting the autism links. Then during our terrible measles epidemic, he started pushing supplements. Then he's tearing down mRNA technology in favor of an older technology that is far more problematic. So what's going on at ACIP, American Advisory Committee Immunization Practices, is a continuum. Now he's going to come back to autism, I think, in a week or two, and he's going to say he's found the cause of autism, which, if you know anything about the complex interplay of autism genetics and potential environmental exposures, all in early fetal brain development, you would know that that's absolutely ridiculous. So I, rather than just comment specifically on what ACIP is saying, which is totally ridiculous, remember, this is part of a systematic effort to destroy our whole vaccine infrastructure, and with it, our pandemic preparedness, and will weaken our whole nation's biosecurity.
But wait, there's more.
I know.
There's more, because just a few weeks ago, RFK Jr. was actually parroting climate denial talking points as well, specifically claiming that windmills, they call them windmills, although obviously we're not talking about milling grain. They're talking about wind turbines.
And usually offshore, sometimes, these are massive
wind
machines.
turbines are supposedly killing whales, and there's no science to support that. The scientific community has been very clear that there is no connection there, but it's part of the assault on clean energy, on renewable energy, in service of the fossil fuel industry, and it is, and it is coordinated at the highest levels of our government now. It's entirely bad faith, and so here we see sort of equal opportunity, an equal opportunity assault by the same individual, RFK Jr., on both sort of climate action, clean energy, and obviously on public health as well.
And along those lines, we have the deregulation effort. So the carbon dioxide emissions being a problem for industry through the EPA. They want to get rid of that ruling. And so the earlier summer report that was put together again by a committee of 5 people who are well known for being climate skeptics, or
we don't even call them skeptics, because skepticism is a good thing in science, but they're
I know, I hate it. It is pseudoscience. They're I'm trying to know the right word to say now, because
we call them climate deniers if they're denying the basics.
Anti-climate science propagandists is really what they are, because they're cherry picking data. They are, and it's propaganda, and I'm going to. These are pros propaganda using the press.
I mean, something unprecedented I have never seen in my entire career. It was so egregious that the U.S. National Academy of Sciences just the other day issued a report specifically addressing the false claims that were made in this so-called EPA report written by these climate contrarians. And I have never seen, Peter can tell you, we both, I'm a member of the National Academy of Sciences. He's a member of the National Academy of Medicine. These reports go through several stages of peer review. There is a long process. And for them to have turned out a report in a matter of weeks is unprecedented. And it speaks to the Academy stepping up and saying, this is too dangerous for us to not respond as rapidly as we possibly can, more rapidly than we've ever responded to anything before.
And the response to that report, that report is 4 times longer than the original report. It has more references. It's an incredible piece of work. And it's a wonderful response. But what came back was this, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we'll get rid of that committee. That we'll see about that report. Of course, we'll take a look at it. And of course it was
Damage
done right.
done.
But what
Yeah.
they did is they, of course, opened up the debate.
Exactly.
And it's coming back to this word, debate, that we started with earlier, talking about Peter's, the invitation to it. And I think this is where the misconstruing, right, and the using of words that have multiple meanings or can be interpreted different ways. It's where, as scientists, we need to be talking to each other the way that you both are. That, as you said, we need to support scientists who want to be talking to people. How do we teach younger scientists? What do we tell younger scientists now how to respond to this? Because now the chess game is on.
Well, one of the things that I say is, I can't think of many instances where science was advanced through debate, especially with someone with no scientific qualifications and has an intent to deceive. I mean, we had in the Solvay physics conferences in the 1920s, you had Einstein having public discussions with Niels Bohr at those meetings, but those were two brilliant physicists, who had differing views, who were trying to figure things out, who respected each other. That's very different from, going on the Joe Rogan show and watching Bobby Kennedy just make it up as he goes along. And as Michael, I think, who first pointed out to me, the minute you do that, you've lost 90% of the battle, because you've platformed now someone with crackpot ideas and given them equal weight. And that in itself is the victory, right then and there. And that's the danger of that false equivalence.
Yeah, the nerd in me likes to frame this in terms of Bayesian statistics and priors. You get up on the stage with the science denier, you've given the audience a prior of 50-50. In other words, you've told them to start out, assume that each of these positions are equally credible, and the best that you can possibly do over the course of that 30-minute or whatever debate would be to actually bring the audience somewhere close to where the weight of science actually stands. That's the best that you can hope to do. So you've almost sort of lost by getting up there. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be refuting the myths, the untruths that are being promoted. We do, because there are honest people who get caught in between. They hear the rhetoric from science deniers. They think there's some debate. They think there's uncertainty. And so they sort of throw up their hands. And then the bad actors win, because they don't need to win the debate. They just need to create enough uncertainty that there's stasis, that there's business as usual, that there's no policy action. Now, a good friend of ours, Bill Nye, I think Bill is the perfect person to debate these science deniers, because it's not Anthony Fauci getting up there. It's not Peter getting up there. It's Bill Nye, one of the most likable people on the planet, that so many people learned to love science from watching when they were young. That's incredibly charismatic and incredibly skilled in that sort of forum. Bill should be doing those sorts of debates, and he does, and he wins them. But the rest of us do have to refute the misinformation. We do have to push back, and there are various ways to do that. But just getting up on the stage with a science denier in general is not a good strategy. I think it was Peter who gave me this anecdote before. It was a colleague of his who once said, a scientist who said, if I debate you, it's going to look really good on your resume and really bad on mine. Yep. And that sort of really underscores what we're talking about here.
And it doesn't mean you can't be out there in the public domain. And I've said, look, I'll go on back on the Joe Rogan shows I had before. I'm just not going to do it the platform, Mr. Kennedy. Yeah. And because I think I think that's very dangerous. It also, sends the wrong message to young scientists about how we do science.
I think that's so important. In this last moment, I've already kept you longer than half an hour, so I appreciate this
we've
time.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah. It's been a great discussion.
It's so wonderful to talk with you, and I just want to talk about all this stuff. But your time is so valuable, and the work you're doing is valuable. Do you have any last moment comments for my audience, for people who might read your book, Peter?
I think the message is our ability to solve scientific problems is at an all-time high. Just in my field alone, between the acceleration of technologies and the use of information science, including AI, and there's almost no infectious disease we can't make a vaccine to. And same with even cancer vaccines. Now we're moving into the cancer vaccine space, that we've got the mRNA technology working so efficiently, and not to let the bad guys turn you away from solving big problems. You can still solve big problems. You're going to have to be more strategic in your career, because I do think we will see declines in government support for science. And so seeking alternatives, whether it's through biotech, through the private sector, through private philanthropies, it's going to make it tougher, but it's still very doable.
And Michael?
Yeah, and I guess my message would be just sort of to the person on the street, to the average person out there. It all feels so overwhelming sometimes that, Peter alluded to this earlier. It's easy for us to fall a victim to sort of doom and despair, and that's a win for the other side. That's a win for the forces of anti-science, because if we throw up our hands in defeat, then they win. And so we have to recognize, and this is true for both pandemics and the climate crisis, that there is urgency, unlike we've ever seen before, no question about it. But we also have agency. It's not too late for us to make a difference here.
The best time to start is now. Yesterday would have been great, but now is fine. It's just keep going, everybody. Let's do this.
Exactly.
Thank you for writing your book, Science Under Siege, everyone. It is available now. And if you head out to places like bookshop.org, your local library, or maybe Powell's Bookstore, if you are in the Portland area like I am, you'll be able to find this wonderful book. And I actually do really recommend this book for people who are considering want to understand the modern dynamic of what's happening, and also who might be considering going into science communication, because it's good to know what you're going to have to deal with. And I think this book sets the landscape for you, so you'll have a place to start. Thank you both so much for your work. Yeah.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. It was a great discussion. The time went by fast.
It was so fast. Oh my gosh. I'm like,
let's do it again. We would love to come back and do it again sometime. So thank you.
There are many more places to go with this. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for watching. This is This Week in Science. Thanks for being here, for chatting in the chat room. And thank you for being interested in the value of science. Please share with your friends out there, because the more we talk about the value of science, the stronger we will all be. Find us again next Wednesday, 8 p.m.-ish Pacific time, for more This Week in Science. It's all in your head.